She gave a homeless man her last sandwich, thinking nothing of it. But days later, a mysterious knock on her door led to an unexpected twist that changed everything. Chicago in the winter isn't for the weak. The wind doesn't just blow, it cuts. Right through coats, bones, and whatever dignity you have left. And Margaret Cooper? She had very little of that left to spare. 30 years. That's how long she'd been in that same shoebox of an apartment on the outskirts of a city that didn't give a damn whether she lived or froze. Her pension was a joke, barely covered rent, let alone heat. She stretched every dollar like it was a lifeline. Discount stores, senior meal programs, a little hustle, and a whole lot of stubbornness. That's how she survived. That morning, she wrapped herself in a coat so old it could have had its own social security number and headed for the community center. Wednesdays were good. Hot meals, coffee that didn't taste like regret, and maybe, if she was lucky, a day-old pastry nobody else wanted. But as she turned the corner, she saw him. Slumped against a cold brick wall, a man, no, a kid, really, wrapped in nothing but a threadbare blanket. His sign was simple. No long-winded sob story, no desperate plea, just hungry. Anything helps. Margaret had seen dozens like him before. This was Chicago. The streets didn't forgive, and neither did life. People like him sat on every other corner, invisible to the world. And yet, something about this one made her stop. He wasn't asking for anything. No eye contact, no outstretched hand, just stillness, like he had already made peace with being ignored. Margaret's grip tightened around her tote bag. She knew better than to stop. Her stomach was already gnawing at her spine. The sandwich in her bag? That was supposed to be dinner, and maybe breakfast too, if she played her cards right. One sandwich. That was it. That was all she had left for the day. She took a deep breath. Keep walking, Margaret. You can't save them all. And yet, her feet didn't move. Something in the way he sat there, shivering, head down, made her insides twist, like a mother seeing her own child lost in a crowd. Oh, to hell with it. She crouched down, knees creaking in protest, and pushed the sandwich into his trembling hands. Eat, son, she said, her voice softer than she expected. The man, no, the boy, lifted his head, and for the first time, she really saw him. Dark circles, cheeks sunken like he hadn't had a decent meal in weeks. But his eyes, those hit her the hardest, tired, resigned, grateful. Thank you, he whispered, voice hoarse like he hadn't spoken in days. Margaret forced a smile, patting his arm the way she used to when her own son was little. No need to thank me, she said. Just pass it on when you can. She stood up, turned away before she could talk herself into giving him her scarf too, and walked off. She had no idea that this tiny act, this one sandwich, was about to change her entire life. Time was a cruel thing. It moved too fast when you wanted it to slow down and dragged its feet when you were desperate for relief. For Margaret Cooper, every day felt like a battle against a ticking clock. The numbers weren't adding up anymore. Rent, up, electricity, overdue, food, stretching thinner than her patience. She had been here before, tight budgets, skipping meals, making do. But this time felt different. The prices weren't just high, they were suffocating. Every time she walked into the grocery store, it felt like the shelves were mocking her. How much can you live on when you've already cut everything to the bone? Then came the final blow. One evening, she came home from another long day of cleaning jobs, aching feet, empty stomach, only to find it taped to her door like some kind of cruel joke. An eviction notice. Margaret yanked it down, hands shaking, and read the words over and over, as if she could force them to change by sheer willpower. 30 days. That was all she had before she was out, before she joined the very people she passed every day, the ones sleeping under bridges, wrapped in whatever scraps of warmth they could find. She sank into her chair, staring at the paper in her hands. Call him. The thought crept in, uninvited. Her son. The one who hadn't spoken to her in years. The one who had built a life without her. She swallowed hard. No, if he had cared, he would have called. She wasn't going to beg. Instead, she did what she always did. She fought. The next few days were a blur of exhaustion. She took on every cleaning job she could find, scrubbing floors until her knees ached, washing dishes in restaurants where no one even bothered to learn her name. She ate less. Sometimes, not at all. One more shift, one more gig, one more dollar. But it still wasn't enough. And then, on the morning of what felt like the end, there was a knock at the door, the landlord. Margaret sighed, running a hand over her face. She wasn't ready for this fight, but ready or not, here it was. She swung the door open, bracing for the worst. But it wasn't the landlord. It was a man in a sharp suit, standing there like he had stepped out of a different world, a world where people didn't live paycheck to paycheck. "Miss Cooper?" His voice was calm, professional. Margaret straightened. "Yes?" The man reached into his briefcase and pulled out an envelope, handing it to her with an unreadable expression. "This is for you." Margaret blinked, her fingers closing around it. "What is this?" she asked, frowning. "Just open it," he said. Her breath caught as she tore through the envelope, hands trembling. The first line nearly knocked the air from her lungs. "In recognition of your kindness, please accept this as a token of gratitude." Her eyes darted to the bottom of the letter. There, a check. Not just a check, a number so large her heart stopped. She gasped, gripping the doorframe to keep from collapsing. What in the world was happening? $50,000. Margaret's hands shook. This had to be a mistake. "Who sent this?" she whispered. The man in the suit smiled. "Anonymous. Just know your kindness didn't go unnoticed." Her mind raced. Who would do this? And then, him. The homeless man. The one she'd given her last meal to. Could it be? She threw on her coat and rushed back to that street corner, and there he was. But different. Clean-shaven, standing tall, talking to another man who looked as lost as he once did. He turned, smiled. "I was hoping you'd come back." Margaret's heart pounded. "It was you, wasn't it?" He nodded. "That meal. It wasn't just food. It was dignity, hope. Someone saw what you did and helped me get back on my feet. I swore if I got another shot, I'd pay it forward." Tears blurred her vision. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to," he said softly. "You already did enough." The check cleared. The eviction notice? Gone. Ripped into tiny, satisfying little pieces. Bills paid. Heat back on, fridge full. For the first time in years, Margaret Cooper could breathe. But she didn't stop there. This wasn't just about her. She started small, an extra sandwich here, a hot coffee there. She'd slip a meal to the guy on the corner, leave a grocery bag at the shelter. Then she took it further. A few calls, a little digging, and before she knew it, she was setting up a fund at the community center, one that helped people the way she had once needed help herself. And then, word got out, and people noticed. Donations started rolling in, small at first, then bigger. One by one, struggling families, veterans, single mothers, people hanging on by a thread, started getting back on their feet. And every time someone asked her why she gave, why she cared, why she spent what she had on strangers, she would just smile and say, because one small act of kindness can change a life, even if it's just a sandwich.